when we were going through Romans, we would periodically jump back into chapter 1 and kind of spend a message per chapter drawing things together. Now, I don't intend to keep doing that all the way through Genesis. That would give us years worth of review messages, and that's not the intention. But I do think it's really helpful at this stage because those first few chapters of Genesis are so weighty, they carry so much that it's worth doing. And before we pick up the pieces and jump into chapter 5, there is in chapter 5 a lot of issues to be dealt with. It may not seem that way. It's just a genealogical list after all. I mean, how much can we really have to talk about? But there's a lot to talk about because there's a lot of controversy and lots of different views about it. And we will find ourselves in some ways back in the middle of the debate that we left before we started Genesis. That is before we started really diving into the text, and that is the age of the earth and these kinds of things. And these genealogies have a way of entering into those debates, and all sorts of things get said about them. And I just want to kind of clear the air as we go through chapter 5 with some of that. But that leaves us today then in Genesis chapter 1, doing this review so that we're able to pick up some steam as we head into chapter 5. Again, we've been so long apart from Genesis that this seems really necessary to me. So, with that then, when I say Genesis 1, I really mean Genesis 1:1 through 2:3. With that said, then, why don't we pray and ask for the Lord's help in this, and then we'll read the passage and move right along. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you and look to you, ask of you that you would once again make this text live among us. Help us to be as awed as we ought to be, as affected that the truth that the text means to set before us would grip our hearts and our minds, Lord. These are weighty words, and I just pray for help in conveying them truthfully and accurately, to convey your message to us as you penned it. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Genesis 1:1 through 2:3. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind." And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens, to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day, and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. Well, there's a lot here, no doubt, the creation of everything. But Moses does it in basically a chapter. And we remember, I hope, this maybe is obvious after what I just said, but I hope you remember that what we have here in Genesis is it's an extremely careful telling of what happened. It's carefully crafted. It's artistically crafted, but it is also extremely brief and selective in what it says. We don't read anywhere about, about a lot of things. Nothing in here about sponges. Nothing in here about any number of things that you might think of that exist in creation. The text speaks generally in broad terms, broad categories to help to convey the idea. And we'll see that as we go through. But just to remember, we have an extremely selective account. There is a high priority here on the economy of words. He's not being verbose and saying things in 10 different ways to get you to understand it, or describing every possible category and subcategory of things that he explains, that he mentions. He's being very brief. So with that then, we just begin in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You may remember that I had said that this was not a summary statement. Some people take this verse 1 as a summary statement, that it's saying, almost as a title for Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then verse 2 picks up to tell how that happened. And we argued against that at the time, because if this verse is a summary statement of what follows, then what we see in verse 2 is that the earth was already there. And if the earth is already there, then God didn't create out of nothing. And that might be a problem for us because we all generally hold to that belief that God created out of nothing. But really it doesn't matter so much what we believe as what the rest of the Bible says. And we saw tons of places where the Bible lays out this doctrine that God created out of nothing. And the one text I'll turn to and read, you don't need to turn there if you don't like to, it's no big thing, but in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 3, we read, by faith, that is by belief in something God has told us, by faith we understand that the universe was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So in day one, when God makes the light and everything that existed but was unseen before, but now we can see it, from that God made everything. And this says that all things weren't just made out of that, but they were made out of things that are not visible. They were made from the Word of God. So even that, what we find in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2, the earth that was without form and void, has its origin in something else, has its origin in God and His Word. The earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So this is the beginning of everything. I offered an interpretive translation of verses 1 and 2 at the time, and I'll say it this way. In the beginning of everything outside of God's person, in the beginning of all that we know and we sense and can imagine, was God's action of creation. He created everything from the highest and loftiest unseen spiritual heavens to the lowest and basest parts of our physical world. The earthly realm, however, this physical realm, was from this first instance without form or filling, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And while it was in that condition, God's Spirit began and was brooding over the face of the waters. Let me just go through these words here just really quickly. In the beginning. Again, not the beginning of God, who had no beginning. He is from everlasting to everlasting. We might think of a line that stretches out forever, mathematically, right? A line goes out eternally in both directions. And this is the being of God. This is God's existence. But then at some point along God's line, a new line begins next to Him when God creates. And this is the line of creation's existence. Mathematically, it's a line, what do we call it, a segment? I'm trying to think, line segment, right? So it starts here and goes on. A what? A ray, correct, thank you. Segment was segmented on both sides, but so a ray. So it begins in one way, and then because of God's desire and God's will that it not all end, it will go on forever. But it's not God, doesn't belong on His line, it is next to Him. It has a definite beginning point and continues today and will continue forever in some sense. This verse is telling us that what happened in that first moment, in that first instance, it is telling us that the line for everything but God has a beginning that originated with God's act. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The word he uses for God here is the word Elohim. And it speaks to us of the fullness of God's deity, his authority, his power. Other places in the Bible, it's used of beings like kings or angels, judges. Oftentimes, though, as a superlative, as a superlative meaning greatness. Its use for God sets him apart as the one who is supremely, uniquely powerful and great and authoritative. It's one thing if I say someone is Elohim-like. They are, we might say God-like, but we don't really mean that. We mean they're powerful, they're authoritative, they have dominion in some way. They're like this. An angel can be like this, can appear compared to a man, can appear this way. A king can appear this way compared to his subjects. Judges even can appear this way compared to their neighbors. But when applied to the one who is this, compared to all others, the one who in the same sentence is said to have created everything, then we know we're talking about one who is Elohim in a unique way, in a special way. It sets him apart as the one supremely, uniquely powerful and great and authoritative. It says he created. God created. Everything owes its beginning to God. We said every process, if you can think of a process that happens in the world, it's owing to God. Every data point, something that exists or true that can be known, it owes its existence to God. Every noun you can think of, if it's a person, place, or thing, it owes itself to God. Every verb, every action, right? Every activity owes its origins to God. Every adjective, every descriptor or quality owes itself to God. These things can trace their causal beginnings back to God's will and God's command at this beginning. But it can trace itself back no further except in the mind of God, who had planned it all out before the foundation of the world, before this beginning happened. What did he create? He created the heavens and the earth. We argued then that this heavens and the earth is a merism, what's called a merism, which means you're talking about, you have a whole spectrum of things. Things maybe at the beginning, like if we say the Alpha and the Omega, or if I say everything A to Z, you know I mean all of it. Right? If I said I'm going to teach you everything that can be known, starting at A and ending at Z, you know that what I'm talking about. Or if I just say A to Z, you understand it. And it's the same way, the heavens and the earth. Talking about everything from as high and as great and as grand as it gets down to the earth. Everything, from the unseen heavens to the basic building blocks of matter, was all created by God at this beginning. We argued that that term heaven applies specifically to the unseen heavens, the heavenly realm, or the third heaven, that place or realm in which unseen spiritual creatures and spiritual beings reside. It's not so much a region up in the stars somewhere as it is a co-extensive realm of heavenly powers and dominions. It has to do with spiritual realities in the heavenly places, things we do not see, but at times throughout history men have seen. Remember Elijah praying for his companion there to have eyes to see what was real. Then there is the earth. Though at first blush this would appear to be talking about our planet Earth, it's actually broader than that. We saw that it is this earth of verses 1 and 2 that make up the formless and empty sea of material from which the entire physical realm was itself separated and formed and filled. So when he says the heavens and the earth, it's not what we think of today as I say, well, up in the sky and then down here on the land. But rather, the heavens is the unseen spiritual realm, and the earth is this whole earthly realm from which, in later on in the text, it says he divided up that earth, divided waters that were there from waters below and made an expanse and called that the heavens and put stars in that. And that's the earth of verses 1 and 2. The earthly realm, the physical created realm. And if we look at verse 2, we see that in verse 2, the basis for the whole plot is really laid out here. The plot of Genesis, the 7-day account of creation. First of all, we have the earth was without form and void. That is, it was unformed and it was unfilled. And then further, darkness was over the face of the deep. That phrase, darkness, is meant to convey several thoughts to us. First, we are to know that part of the ominous nature of the earthly realm at this stage is its darkness. There's no form there. That's certainly scary enough. There's nothing recognizable. But that is increased, the frightfulness of that is increased by the lack of light, which we would need to discern the formlessness anyway. Second, the only form we would recognize is this form, the deep. And it's actually saying that there was just a watery mass, nothing serving any function, just a blob of stuff, you might say. It's quite a thing. It's amazing to think about that such a place could even be conceived, that God could create something like this, and it would be there as it is. We're not saying that God would ever leave anything in this way, but that He could conceive of a world in which things existed in this way. I mean, if I were to ask you to imagine a universe that God might create, you would not have imagined something that had no form at all and couldn't be discerned and seen. But God made the earthly realm that way at first. We can be thankful for every bit of order and form and filling that God accomplished. The thing to notice then is that God is beginning with a blank slate. The chalkboard, we might say, is clean, no previous markings. There's no mark left on it by anyone else. It's a watery wasteland, void of inhabitants or even anything that we would recognize as functional form. There's no tempest, no storm. There's no opposing gods or opposing will. It is just a blank slate. And if we were to use this chalkboard metaphor, it's as though, we see at the end of the verse, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. It's as though God comes over and grabs the chalk and walks up near the chalkboard. And we're saying, okay, now what's going to happen? The craftsman picks up his tools and prepares for work. Again, we have in this verse a description of God's creation apart from His further command. It's empty, it's barren, it's dark, it's non-distinct, it's unordered material. It's like a big pile of wood. It's not doing anybody any good, but He's going to take it, He's going to frame this thing to what He wants it to be, and He's going to form it, and He's going to fill it. It's really profound that one of the first things the Bible tells us about God is that He takes disorder and barrenness, and He brings order and life and beauty and that which is truly good. In opposition to every other idea about our habitation, the Bible says that we live in a place that is ordered and upheld by one single Creator God, the only God who ever was and who ever will be. In this scene, and really all the way through this chapter, you notice there's no other gods, there's not a God to defeat or to divide, no God to delegate to, no controversy among divine persons. There's no book of magic that God used to powerfully form it all into its present shape. No forces to be driven back or overcome. Perfect stillness, nothing happening at all. The only activity at all is that which belongs to God. He was hovering or brooding over the face of the waters. The Spirit of God was brooding over and hovering over the face of the waters. So here God comes and there's this activity. He's brooding over the face of the waters, rousing it, stirring it in some way, preparing it in some way for what He was going to do. And He comes down, it says, over the face of the waters, which has to mean He draws near. He doesn't do this from afar. He comes in and gets personally involved. We're told that the God who is everywhere, in some sense, draws near to this watery, formless mass, the earthly realm, and He's preparing to act. So we see the activity of God the Spirit. we see the care that God has for His creation and of the nearness He intends to His creation. He did not speak, again, in command from afar off. He literally drew near to the earthly realm, stirring and brooding over it in anticipation of His will and His command. Now, we don't really know exactly what it means that God drew near, that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. We could debate about this for a long time, but it has to mean at least the text is meant to convey to us a nearness of some kind, a direct and an interested action with matter as it was in this formless and empty state. God drew near to the earthly realm, stirring and brooding over it in anticipation of His will and command. So it speaks to us about some kind of a preparatory work. And this is really profound when you think about it. That before God said, "Let there be light," before God did any of these commands in terms of in the earthly realm, when He was beginning to form it and to fill it, before the first action of God on creation, week day 1, before He speaks the command, "Let there be light," God already created the heavens and the earthly realms. And as the earth is in this disordered and barren state, God begins to act upon that earthly realm with special, intense care, preparing what was there to respond to His sovereign will of command. It's not just that you had this empty, formless realm called the earthly realm, and God went and spoke. He did speak, but intervening in there before He spoke was this brooding over the face of the waters done by the Spirit of God. We're not told what that did, we're not told anything any effect that had on that earthly realm, but we're told that He did it. Somehow preparing for what He was going to do. How would that have looked to an observer? Well, we don't know. What changes, if any, were happening to the formless and empty mass before God spoke light into existence? That cannot be known. The hidden things belong to God, but the revealed things belong to us. It is told to us simply that the Spirit of God was brooding over the waters. It speaks to us again of nearness, of involvement, of care, of intentionality, and of preparation. It speaks to us about the wisdom of God in all of His actions. Preparation. Then we come to day 1. Consider here maybe first that God simply made light by His statement. There is no mediating agency or further work upon it in order to establish it. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Notice in verse, on the second day though, in verse 6, God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." Verse 7, "And God made the expanse and separated the waters." So you have kind of a distinction here. These creative acts are described in different ways. On day 1, God just says, "Let this happen," and it was. "Let there be light," and light was. It just was. But later He creates in ways that are different than that, or at least they're described differently. So God created without any other agent. It was a miraculous work of God. Having made it, He deems it good. By good, what does He mean? That it conforms in its manifest reality. He made something, and what it is in its essence, what it truly is, comports and agrees with what He had planned to make. The perfect plan He had in mind, what He wanted to create, that's exactly what was made. It's good. He steps back, He looks at His work, and is satisfied with it. It's like, again, a picture of the artist that goes, maybe they got a charcoal drawing or a pencil drawing, and they're drawing, and they do a little bit, and they step back and they observe it. God doesn't grab the eraser and to change anything. He says, "Perfect. That's good. That's what I wanted." And then He begins down day 2. You see, and so this is the way it is. He steps back and looks at His work and is satisfied with it. He made what He set out to make. Then what does He say? And verse 4 still, the second half, "And God separated the light from the darkness," which does not here mean that He pulls them apart, right? He doesn't, it's not like light and darkness was one thing and He pulls them apart, but rather the two cannot coexist in a mixed way. Light dispels darkness, the Scripture says. Rather, God sets limits and functions to the darkness and the light on the earth. He puts each into its assigned place and function. Those functions are declared to be by Him. God called the light day and the darkness He called night. He separates them in clear, distinct terms. What did light look like when it wasn't light, when it wasn't day and night? I don't know. How did this function in the world? We're not told, but at this time He established them as day and night. So essentially the main point of this day is not the creation of light so much, though that happened, but the establishing of day and night. That is a regular time cycle of light and dark, day and night. God establishes this at the beginning. The first realm of creation is the realm of time and the realm of day and night. And there was evening and there was morning, He says, one day. You might remember, as we covered through this, that there was evening and there was morning is actually a description of the night. There was evening and then there was morning and then there is the day. And so we looked at several scriptures from that where we have all the way through the Bible, every time it's evening and then morning, it's talking about the nighttime. And this is what it says here. One of the texts that I have here in my notes here we won't turn to, but in Numbers chapter 9, verses 15 and 16, verse 15 describes a period of time. It says evening and morning, from evening till morning, and then the next verse, 16, says all through the night. That was just a really clear example that we used. So here we are. Now then, day 2. Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from above. Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. What is this expanse? What is the expanse? Well, its purpose. It's intended to hold water above the land, it says. Right? Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. To separate water from water. What was its name? It was named sky or heaven. Referred to as the place where God, in verse 14 later, it's referred to as the place where God puts the sun, the moon, and the stars. In verse 20, it's the place where birds fly. Some people say, when they describe this, that He's talking about He created, instead of an expanse, they'll say He created a vault or a ceiling or a global ocean up there. But these are not really maybe the most helpful way to take the text. Some people concerned with the origins debate talk about this as a pre-flood kind of canopy, right? Before the flood came, there was this canopy that was up over the earth. And this is what's being described here. And the problem we found with that was that later in the Bible, the thing that we see when we look out over the sky in day or night is given the same phrase, the same term. So it can't be something that existed before the flood and no longer exists. Daniel and David both describe the same thing. Rather, when we talk about this expanse or this ceiling, this roof, this tent or whatever that's out there that God set up, we're talking phenomenologically. We're talking about the way things look. When you go out there and look at the night sky, it looks like a giant canopy over you. When you go out and look in the daytime, it looks like a giant canopy. When you see the sunrise or the sunset, it seems like there's some thing here. And it's not a scientific description at all. It's just what we're talking. It's just what things look like. We're told that there are waters above the sky. Well, likely the clouds. We looked at text from the Scriptures to talk about that. What a thing. So God creates this expanse. We see in day 1, God creates light and He separates light from darkness. Here, God enters in. He visits this watery mass, the face of the deep. He's there on the face of the deep, and what does He do? He divides it up. Waters above and waters below. And He does that with this expanse, with this sky. And again, it's verse 7, God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. God does not say, and it was good. Not because there's anything wrong with it, he just doesn't say it here. This is, again, just a reminder of the highly stylized way that this whole account is laid forth for us. Each one of these days, we tend to read them and think they all follow the same pattern, like a formula, but they don't. There are similar phrases throughout, but certain words are left out of some days and added, doubled up, tripled up sometimes on other days in order to highlight for us certain significant actions. So then day 3, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. You remember that when it says the waters under the heavens and the earth should be gathered together into one place, it's really just into their place, into the place. And it's not so much that they had one big giant ocean or something like that, but rather that they were all gathered together where they should be, into their place, into the place. And let the dry land appear. They're all gathered up together so that the dry land appears. That's the whole point. Gathered up together. And there were texts we looked on that. But one text, just to make it clear, if you look at verse 10, it says, God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, plural. And then verse 20, and God said, let the waters, plural, swarm with swarms of living creatures. So there he's got bodies of waters, or waters. It's not just one body of water. And he calls it good. Verse 10, God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Again, thus far up until this point, so in day 1, he does what he does. He steps back and says, man, that's great. That's good. And he goes back to the drawing board, you might say, not to revisit and redesign, but to continue drawing, continue his sketch, continue what he's doing. And he's done some more. Day 2, and he's finished there. And it's like he doesn't step back and observe. He doesn't need to. He's done what he's wanted to do. Day 3, he does some more, and he looks back again. And we're told he steps back and says again, yep, it's good. This is what I wanted. This is what I planned to do all along. We're getting there. He doesn't need to pick up his eraser again. He keeps it over there. There's no need for it. What else does he say on this day? Verse 11. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. Now you notice how different this is than when God said, let there be light, and there was light. Here he says, let the earth bring forth vegetation. Right? Let the earth do it. Plants yielding seed and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And the result, and it was so. Verse 12, the earth brought forth vegetation. Plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. So what a thing. He creates here, or makes in a different way. Plants yielding seed and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed. But God, when he makes here, he doesn't, what does it mean that the earth sprouts vegetation? It probably simply means that plants, this is where they grow, where they exist, in the earth. And the earth nourished them in this sense. God makes them and the earth nourishes them. And they grew. The earth did bring forth vegetation. It brought forth plants that yielded seed. I mean, here's this little plant and it brings up and it's yielding seed. This is what happens when God creates. Trees were bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. God sees that it's good. There are only two categories of plants discussed: plants that yield seeds freely and outwardly, and plant trees that bear fruit on them, in which is their seed. Again, this is ridiculously broad in terms of the plant kingdom. I mean, it's man-centered. I mean, we're talking about these things that all have seeds in them. Later on, we read that men are given all the plants that have the seeds in them for food, specifically the plants that have the seeds in them. Man is meant to be a farmer in some sense. He's meant to make use of that and to harvest and to plant. I mean, we might say, though, if this is what's created here, what about algae? What about mosses? What about ferns? What about sponges? What about all this kind of stuff? It's not even mentioned. What about any further breakdown of the plants with seeds? What about aquatic plants? These things aren't mentioned. It's a very selective telling. But they produce according to their kind. According to their kind. Again, the kinds are exceedingly broad. It's more like, you might say, categories or varieties. Or like a kid might say, well, that's a different kind of plant. It's not like a scientist would say a different kind. It's like a child would say a different kind. It's just so broad. These categories are determined in such exceedingly broad ways. The idea is simply, even later on when we have animals, no fishes are producing horses. The fish doesn't have all its eggs and lay a bunch of horses. That doesn't happen. No roses are yielding potatoes, no grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles. There are inherent restraints around reproductive activity. Things produce according to their kind. And all this then was so as God created it to be. Again, fulfillment is exactly as God declared. He said, let this thing happen, and what happened is exactly what He said. The earth brought them forth, and God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. Let me just summarize a few things a little bit here. God does not depend on other gods to do the work of the day and night cycle. He simply assigns it to His own creation and upholds it by His powerful word. In fact, amazingly, the phenomenon of day and night is brought into the creation before the luminaries are even discussed. In all the other creative accounts in the ancient world, you have these other gods who are themselves either the sun and the moon and the stars, or who themselves control the sun and the moon and the stars. And God, whoever the creator God is, or gods, assigned the work to them to be done. And here, God creates night and day, and these things don't even exist yet. What a thing. That's probably not necessarily making a scientific point. Scientifically we say, how is that even possible? Well, maybe it is possible, or maybe it's not. But it's certainly making a theological point. Day and night cycles exist primarily by God's will and command. And luminaries also happen to exist by God's will and command. You get the sense here that the relationship that we know between the luminaries and the light that we receive from them in the day-night cycle could be different if God so chose. It's not bound to make the light givers and then make the light. He makes the light and then He makes those who give light. You might say it said another way, God is the light giver, not the luminaries. The cosmic waters obey God's every will and decree. He does not fight the God called sea and exert His will over a competing God, nor does He learn how to manipulate it. Rather, He chooses to act upon it as a craftsman would do a piece of clay or bronze. He spreads out a division between the waters so that they act as He wishes them to act. On the third day, we see God further in control of the waters as He gathers them together, and then the dry land emerges from out of the water. Then, far from plant life being the result of some cyclical activities of Baal, as some people in Canaan believed, plant life is from what Baal does, or from the proper manipulation of the right combinations of gods, as the Egyptians would have believed, that rather the true God commands plant life to come into existence, and they are formed and established with a life-sustaining property all their own, given to them by God. And remember the manward emphasis of the account. At this point so far, the earth is the focus. He created the heavens and the earth, but why then do we just turn and all we're talking about is the earth and what applies on the earth, because it's a manward focus here. This is God's revelation to men about their created realm. We're not spending chapters and chapters talking about the angelic order and things like this. It's simply not the concern. The day and night cycles that are described so far are used by man to order his life. The sky will provide a cycle of rain and water for man. Dry land is where man will live. Vegetation is there for man to eat and use. And it's described in a way that a chef might describe it, not a botanist. The realm in which we live and which God created was created specifically for man, with men in view, men in mind. He created a place for us to inhabit. But there's also a Godward emphasis in the account. Think of this. He's the only actor so far. No one else has done anything. I mean, you have the earth brought forth vegetation, but it did it by His command. He said, do this, and that happens. He's the designer. He's the builder. He's the observer and the evaluator. He's not asking anyone else, what do you think? Do you think I should leave it like this or should I change it? He doesn't ask anyone. He's the one who observes. He's the one who evaluates. His is the purpose. His is the plan. His is the good by which all things are being measured. Then you have now in day 4, some objects are made in day 4. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the earth to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. He goes on. He made the greater light, which we know to be the sun, but there were names for the sun, and He didn't use that name. Names for the sun in some of these cultures were names of what they believed. I mean, the name of the sun was the name of the god they thought the sun to be, or the light, the moon, the lesser light. Again, given a name, but not given a name in this text. Not given a name here. We avoid those names because they're not gods. They're not anything. Then he says, and the stars. And we just mentioned at that time, it was so incredible that the stars are so briefly mentioned. In the other religions, the constellations and their representative gods were multiplied without number. Everyone having a different function and controlling a different aspect of your destiny. Everyone a god that must not be crossed and which may be appeased or may be manipulated. Above all, to be feared. And think of this. Israel's neighbors, here they are, when this constellation and that constellation and this planet comes over and this one, and they're all trying to divine what they need to do and what should happen, trying to read these, what they think of to be signs, though it's mixed up with idolatry. And there's books that could be written about what you have to do to appease this god or that god, or there's men who are priests and they somehow have a way to convey to you the meaning of these gods and why they're angry or not angry or pleased or whatever. So much of your life is spent concerned with these stars. And here it just says, well, yeah, He made those too. And moves on. It's an incredible thing. All that's mentioned is just the purpose that they serve. Well, first of all, they attest to God's glory and His rule over time by His decree. But there are some other purposes. It says they separate between the day and the night, or the light and the darkness. What else? What's another purpose? It says they're to be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. 3 things they're to do. They serve as signs. They serve to mark seasons, and they serve for days and years, to mark days and years. And what else? They give light upon the earth from their place in the expanse. What a thing. I'm not going to talk about what these signs are. We spent some time doing that before. There's not time for that. But it says also in verse 18, these things were put in place to give light upon the earth, and verse 18, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. They're given a dominion to rule and govern, to impose their rule upon the rest. And the way to think about that here for them is simply this: the sun and the moon are larger and dominate the day and night skies. They shine forth their light and mark time in dominating ways. All of these objects, but especially the sun and the moon, are the keepers of the signs and the seasons and the days and the years. So if the greater light and the lesser light and the stars all serve these functions of being of signs and for seasons and for days and years, well, the sun and the moon do that more than the rest. With greater precision, with greater clarity, with greater ease. They fulfill this role for God, their Creator. They do it in reference to Him. They exist not to be served, as in the other religions, but rather to serve. They serve at the pleasure of God. And this is the way it works. And what God has them doing is serving mankind. With the light that they cast on the earth, with the signs and the seasons and the days and the years that they mark out, this is the way they work. Their service to God is identified in their casting light upon the earth in such a way as to faithfully keep signs and seasons and days and years. And this will help mankind to identify these things as needed. Evidently, man's going to need to be able to distinguish one day from another and one season from another. And he's going to be able to need to see certain signs. And God wants that. And he says at the end, and it was, God, verse 18, and God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. Verse 20, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. I'll stop there just for a moment. We come up with this word created again. Created. It's the first time the word is used since verse 1. The first time. In verse 1 it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then everything else since then it says God made this and He made that. He's got the earth and He's making things with it. And then now it's like a fresh start again. God created something new, something fresh. It's a new word again. The first time it's been used in this work week of days. What are the creatures that are made on this day? Living creatures they're described as, literally having the breath of life. They are objects that move and are animate. They're distinct from plant life. And so our word, animal, here is a good one. If by that word we're referring to that which is not animate. Which is animate. He says he made these animals, living creatures. Let the birds fly above, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created, what did He create? The great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds. Well, what are these sea creatures? Well, the words, you might remember, we talked about, the large sea creatures, used like of a crocodile or reptiles. You might think of Leviathan, whatever that might have been. That the ocean would swarm with swarms of them, a massive amount of one creature wiggling and moving and abounding all together. A swarm. What creatures are these? With swarms of creatures. What a thing. So God created the great sea creatures, and then every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm. Think of shoals of fish and schools of fish and things like this. These are all created by God. Let the birds fly above the earth and across the expanse. The word birds there just simply means that which covers with a wing. So you look up and you see this thing kind of covers you, and it's got wings. That's what God made. He made that. We're just talking about these things in visual ways. I mean, it's like the birds. Well, what kind of birds? What about this kind of thing? What about that kind of thing? What about insects that fly? Things that cover. They got wings, it goes up in the sky, flies around. God made that stuff. We're just kind of picking up the highlights of these things. Even the great sea creatures. So what about crawfish? Did He make crawfish? I mean, they don't really swarm, and they're not a great sea creature. You see, you're leaving some things out, but he's not intending to describe every single little thing. Talking in broad terms again. God gives them a blessing, the fish and the birds. That is, the creatures that live in the water and the creatures that live in the air and upon the earth. They're given a blessing. Verse 22, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. There's blessing. They would be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. The fact of their having been blessed by God demonstrates that they are in no way contrary to God. Again, some of the other religions, you have these great sea creatures are opposing maybe one god or another. One god's the god of the sea, another god's the god of the sky, or something like this, and these gods are in conflict with one another, and one god is able to manipulate the sea creatures, another god, the birds of the air, and it's not this way. The one God who is created and blessed these creatures to do and to be what they are. They are the way they are because God blessed them to thrive being that way. You think of these large sea creatures. You think of, we've got a term, killer whales. God said to the orcas, He said to those killer whales, be fruitful and multiply. And it's this way. He blesses them sovereignly. The blessing given to the creatures of the seas and to the birds of the air is necessary for them to thrive. Apart from the blessing of God, they would not. But it's not a command to them. He doesn't command them to do this, but rather it's a blessing pronounced, which enables these creatures to thrive in the way that God wants them to. So that the water would, as a result, swarm with swarms of them. And the sky would be filled with birds flying above the earth and across the expanse of the heavens and living on the earth. They are also, in a sense, to rule. They fill and inhabit their realm. They are the ones who inhabit these domains. They possess them. And every swimmer knows it, right? You get out in the ocean, start to swim around, and you know you do not belong out here. In one sense, this is another realm entirely. It's their domain. We're given lordship over it, but there's a sense in which they have some kind of reign there. Day 6 then, let the earth bring forth creatures according to their kinds. Again, let the earth bring forth, just like in day 3, let the earth bring forth. Now, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth, each according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Just notice, first of all, whatever God makes with all the beasts of the earth and all these different things, all the land animals, He stops, and we have not yet made man. God made the animal kingdom, as we think of it, all the stuff you see in the zoo. He made all that stuff, and then He said, now that's good. That's whatever I was doing with these animals, I've done it. I've made all I've wanted to make, and I'm done. I'm finished. It's good. And then He sets out in a new direction after that, and God said, let us make man in our image. He's not an animal. Not an animal. It's important to remember. Then you have in verse, you remember, on the third day, said, let the earth sprout vegetations, and then it did, the earth sprouted. And then here it says, let the earth bring forth living creatures, each according to their kinds. And verse 25 says, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds. It doesn't say, and the earth brought them forth. surely the same thing happened. Surely it wasn't this day that, on this day, are we meant to think that God said, let the earth bring it forth? And then the earth didn't do it, and then God said, all right, I'll do it myself. It's not that kind of thing. But in day 3, God said, let the earth bring forth vegetation, and the earth brought it forth. But then, and the same kind of thing happens here on day 6 with the animals, but it's described differently for us. It doesn't say, and God said, let the earth bring forth, and then the earth brought it forth. It says, let the earth bring forth, and then God made it. And I think the implication is that with every kind of progressive step of His creation, God is kind of more involved. It's like the artist, right? He's working on his drawing, and he's getting a little closer to being done, and it's like he's more excited about it. It's closer to what he's wanted. It's not, at the beginning he's setting out, and he just kind of, humanly speaking, it's like the artist might not even be totally sure what he's even how this one area of the painting is going to finish yet. But he's kind of sketching things out, and he's kind of got his eraser, and he's getting things, and then eventually he's all in on this thing, and he's committed, and it's turning out beautifully. Well, with the Lord, He knows from the beginning what He wants, and He begins to sketch it out. He steps back, yep, that's great. Does His work again, comes back and checks it, yep. Man, I'm good. I did everything exactly as I intended to do it. This is good. Does a little more, it's better. Does a little more. And then it's like the closer he gets, the nearer he gets to what he's doing, the more involved he is. The more energized he is in a sense, the more determined he is to make this happen, the more personally invested he is in it. And it's this way with everything we do too, right? When you first maybe set out on a certain adventure to do something, or not adventure, a certain venture to do something, you might begin with lots of energy. That's fine. And then maybe the process is hard and you wear down, but then if you keep on with it, then the closer you get to the finish line, the more eager you are to bring it to completion, the more involved you are. And I think in some sense, it's this way with the Lord here. There's a greater intensity of personal care and involvement. Now, I know maybe that doesn't all stand up to theological scrutiny, but I don't have any other way to understand what happens here than to understand that it's conveying some sense in which God is more personally involved in His own care. Step by step, creature by creature, God's creation is becoming more complex, more ordered, more remarkable, more amazing. Again, the creatures that are made are in the broadest of categories. You've got behemoth, large, four-footed, domesticated animals. Many translations say cattle or livestock. The word can refer to other beasts or to beasts in general. But in this context, when set apart from the beasts of the earth, it takes a more narrow meaning of domesticated animals. This is what we're talking about. Domesticate livestock. What do you have that you can corral and raise and grow? What are the things that Abel maybe was taken care of? Those are the kinds of things we're talking about. And creeping things, small animals that creep and crawl and scurry, stuff you don't want to step on. It's always down at your feet, crawling around. That's the stuff. Rodents, reptiles, insects, any other thing that keeps close to the ground. And then beasts of the earth, just wild animals in contrast to domesticated ones. You got animals you can use, you can farm with, and you can keep, and you can shepherd, and you got those that you can't. And that's the distinction. And that's the only way they're distinguished here. Then notice again, God steps back again, as it were. He observes His work. He evaluates it according to His good intentions and His expert eye, and He concludes that His work in the animal kingdom is just what He had set out to do in that realm. All the kinds are as He would have them to be, and He saw that it was good. And again, humanity is not a part of that. We're also made from the ground, but we're not the same as they. We're not part of that kind of creature. Nowhere in the Bible are we classified in that way. Then we come to men. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God says, let us make man in our image. We're going to do that. And when He thinks of something made in His own image, He says we're going to give it dominion. It's going to be in charge. It's going to rule. It's going to reign. It's going to be Lord over everything in its realm, because it's going to be made in my image. And then what does He do? He makes it. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. That word created that has only been used twice so far in the Bible is used 3 times here about the creation of man. And it's used 3 times in the creation of man in a poem about the creation of man. And about creation of man in the image of God specifically. What a thing. This is central, it's chief. The greatest thing that God created is man. This is God's opinion. And Moses is conveying it to us. I mean, think about it. You have God created all the heavens and the earth, and He's making all these things. Then He creates again. He creates, the first time He creates a living being, He creates. It's something special and new and remarkable. And you have the fish and the birds. Then He makes these animals. And all that's good. And then He says, now I'm going to do something in my own image. If you need no other reason to think that humanity is superior to everything else, simply the fact that God said, I'm going to make it in my image. That's one reason. Secondly, the poem that's here. It stands out apart from everything else. Thirdly, the greatest and highest word used in the Bible in terms of created is used here 3 times about humanity. 3 times it's used. What a thing. And then man is given dominion over everything else and over the whole place. I mean, think about it. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over all the other creatures, right? Over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over what else? I'll skip a phrase here, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Everything. All the creatures. And over what else? Over all the earth. So the whole place and all the inhabitants of the place are all subject to man. He's the greatest of God's creatures in the mind of God. And we also see it because everything was good. Then when He finally makes man, it is, as He says, verse 31, and God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. Now that man has been made, and there's an image of God in the world, like God in the world, in relationship to God, blessed by God, commanded by God, in relationship to God, now things, the whole created order now is good. I mean, there are people who have the idea that if we could just get man out of the world, things would be great. Right? I mean, the world would really thrive if it weren't for humanity. But that's just not it. It wasn't thriving until a man was there to have dominion over it and to rule over it and to be the image of God in the place. And then God gives them a blessing in a unique way. In verse 22, speaking to the animals, God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and all this goes on. But look at verse 28 with men. And God blessed them, and God said to them. Direct personal communication and relationship. They're not just these creatures like the animals. God's up above them, ruling over them, but they don't have this relationship to Him. He blesses them, and they just enjoy a blessed existence. But when it's men, He blesses them and sits down and speaks something to them and says, I want you to have this blessing. I'm going to give it to you. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. He wants to convey this to them. He wants you to be fruitful and multiply, and for humanity to fill the earth and to subdue it and have that dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And then He lets us know, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. So don't think, man, even though you have these things for food and they belong to you, that nobody else can get them. Right? I've given the green plants for food for everything that lives. They all can have it. They can eat freely of those things. You have this personal way that man is dealt with. that's totally unique. Man is also unique in a few other ways. There's a unique plan for man. Let us make, not let there be, spoken out into the created order, but rather God speaking within himself, deliberating with God. Let us do this. Let us make. He takes special care, special intentionality. He uses the utmost care and attention. It's that rare moment when the painter sits down to put himself in his painting, right? This is what he does. It's always a specially deliberated endeavor. A special plan. There's a unique pattern for man. In our image, after our likeness. Nothing else in all the account even hints at being in the likeness of God. All other forms, all other creatures are made by Him and of His design. And in that sense, they speak to us something about what He's like, right? The heavens declare the glory of God. They tell us something about Him. But only of man does God say, in our image, after our likeness. Only man is truly and surely patterned after God. And then there's this unique purpose for man. Let him have dominion. As God's image, man is to rule in the midst of the world that God made. He's to emulate God's rule everywhere that he goes on the earth. When God put His image on the earth, when He made a creature to be as His image in the world, He placed a royal, ruling, blessed, fruitful creature upon the earth. And when mankind lives as God intended for him to live and governs the world as God intended for him to do, this is an act of worship for man. He's serving his Lord. Man was to go out and increase the knowledge and the understanding of God throughout the whole realm in which God had placed him. Man was to be the image of God in his actions, in his capacities, in his existence. He was to be this image. And you have here then, and God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good, and there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. And we come then to the seventh day, the highlight of the whole thing. You might read through this, and so many people think that the chief glory of creation is mankind, but it's actually the rest and the satisfaction of God. The problem we began with is in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. He made it all, but this earth was without form, and it was void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So we read these first 3 days about God forming it, the next 3 days about God filling it, and then this last day, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished His work that He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work that He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all His work that He had done in creation. And we can miss this, that it says in verse 2, and on the seventh day God finished His work. Most of the time we read that this first account of creation, and we read it as, well, God finished on the sixth day, and the seventh day He just rested. But what it says is He finished on the seventh day. Whatever it was God had in mind, what He set out to do with creation from before it started, He didn't finish until day 7. That's when it finally finished. And what did He do on the seventh day? It says, verse 3, so God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. He set it apart for Himself. When everything was finished, and all the host of them, and all the forms and all the filling, when all that had happened, on that day then, He finished His work. What did He do? He rested. He put His feet up and enjoyed what He had built and what He had made, satisfied. And He blessed that day and made it holy, consecrated it unto Himself, because on it He rested. He was satisfied. So once He made it all, He thought, this is great, and He rested in it. And in the resting, when God says, this is what I've desired, and He sets down to dwell there in the place, then that is to bless it and to make it holy. I mean, think about the logic here of verse 3. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Those are the two things He did. He blessed it and He made it holy. How do you know that? Because on it God rested from His work that He had done in creation. He took His rest in the creation. He came and inhabited the created order in some way and took His rest there. Found satisfaction, found joy, found delight. And in doing that, He functions when He comes near and chooses to dwell there in that manifest way. He blesses it. But He also sets it apart as holy and consecrates it unto Himself in that way. And this is what this was all designed to do. The culmination of creation is not man. Surely mankind is made in the image of God, and the overall creative work is not very good until man crowns God's work. But the narrative moves on to further activity of God. It does not allow us to take our eyes off of God yet. He's not done. There's this seventh day, and it's not finished until then. We noticed again and again in the creation account that things were oriented toward man and described in terms of their relationship with man. Then we saw that man himself is described in terms of his relationship to creation on one hand and his relationship to God on the other. But here on the seventh day we see that until everything is as a whole brought to God for His enjoyment and for His rest, then it is unfinished. It's not complete. It's made. It's all set up. It's like, let's say you get a Christmas present, kids, and you got this thing and it's in a box and you got to open it up and you got to put it together. It's assembled. It's all together. Maybe it needs batteries. You say, what's wrong with it? Well, it needs some batteries. You go get some batteries and you put them in. Nothing happens. It's not turned on yet. It's this kind of thing. It's all put together, but it's not functioning yet as it should. And it's not until God inhabits the place that the switch gets turned on and now it's working as it's supposed to. Now it's finished. Now it's arrived. The narrative now is complete. It's not that God does anything more on this day, that He does more work. Rather, it is that He stops and consecrates the time to Himself. Now that everything is made, He settles down and rests and enjoys what He's made. I mean, you could technically ask, in one sense, if I set out to build a house and I get it all built and you say, what are you doing the whole time? I say, I'm building myself a house, place to be. Say, okay. And I get the structure complete and it's all done. You say, are you finished? On one level, I could say, well, I've finished building it, yes. But another level, you say, have you finished your house? And any reasonable person, if they hadn't moved in yet, would say, well, we haven't moved in yet. Meaning, I'm not done. I set about with a purpose to build something for me. And it's not accomplished yet. What does Revelation say? The habitation of God, the dwelling place of God is with man. That was His desire. And until the seventh day comes where He inhabits the place and rests in it in joyful fellowship with an obedient humanity, He's not really at rest. But here He could rest. He could rest there. And now that's when the work is finished, when God rested. Apart from moving in, you're not done. And this is the way it is with God. He made it all. Sure, it was all complete. It's very good. I mean, right? He puts the bow on the door in a sense. I mean, it's all, this house is exactly what I had wanted it to be. Everything is functioning just perfectly. It's all, or everything's in order and prepared. Now I need to go get all my stuff and we're moving in. But until we're moved in, it's not the home that we've desired it to be. His purpose isn't accomplished. Now, the seventh day, He moves in a sense. He rests. Now that everything, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and on the seventh day God finished His work that He had done. And He rested on the seventh day from all His work that He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Why? Well, because He rested from all His work that He had done in creation. He rested in that. What a thing, now that it's all made. Having drawn near to the earthly realm in powerful manifestation in chapter 1, verse 2, God orders and populates His creation according to His good will. The solution to an earthly realm not in full accord with God's plan and will, which is what things were like in verse 2, when it was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The solution to that is not the help or the conquering of other gods, but the effortless imposition of God's creative will. Throughout the creation days, what do we witness? We witness wise and powerful edicts of God, who creates out of nothing, who establishes and upholds by His powerful word. God's intention to express His loving and good character is underway at the very beginning in the formation of a world that expresses His power, expresses His wisdom in its design. But the loving and the good character of God is seen most clearly in His blessing upon mankind and the remarkable privilege given to mankind in His making. God did in fact shower mankind with blessings and honors. You see His love, you see His good character. We saw His power and His wisdom in the way things were designed. We see His love and His good character in His blessing of men, in His desire to reveal Himself to humanity and to the heavenly realm. Throughout this entire plot development it is abundantly clear that this is a sacred story of creation. It's all being designed and all being established. It's all being upheld by God for His good and sacred purposes. No one in nothing is made to have its existence in the far-off corner of His creation. Everything that He makes is observed by Him, specially it's evaluated by Him, all of it. And it's therefore sacred. Once established, once all made, it is all judged by Him to be very good, to be a source of delight to Him. Now that everything is very good, again, God ceases His work of creation, having brought it to the verge of His intended goal. And His activity now shifts from creative work and design and establishing of things, rather to simply restful satisfaction and enjoyment. He sets apart these freshly obtained circumstances, this realm that He's made, this earthly realm, sets it apart as sacred, both to Him and to mankind. And that's the resolution of the plot. God made the heavens and the earth. The earthly realm was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. It needed further work, and God is the one to do it. He has a plan and He has a purpose in mind that will satisfy Him, and He accomplishes all of His will in a sovereign and orderly, masterful way. When He completes the work, He stops His craftsmanship and He rests in His finished labors, consecrating everything to Himself in a state of blessedness and a state of satisfaction. There is this emphasis then on the seventh day. What a thing. The order that God established at creation at the end of the sixth day is desirable to God, it's sacred to God. He seeks to dwell there. The thrust of this telling, this 7-day creation week, is not that God made these things. That is important. The thrust of it is that God made what He made to inhabit it, to enjoy it for Himself, to be a blessing to us and a blessing to Him, to be a delight to Him, to satisfy His own desire, to have a place to inhabit, to have a creature to reveal Himself to display Himself to, both in heaven and in earth. This is the thrust. This is the purpose. You remember in Job, he speaks about the angels shouting for joy as they were seeing God create and make and do these things. And this is what it is. The seventh day was the day of satisfaction to God, a day where he stepped back and enjoyed it all. We ought not think of God being a far-off God who made this thing and this earth, and he's just kind of out here, and the earth is here kind of doing its own thing. Rather, God made this thing so that he could be in it, with it, a part of things, intimately involved, relationally involved, speaking to us, conversing with us, walking with us, there in the cool of the day, helping us with our needs, revealing more and more about himself. What a blessing. If we think of the created world, again, we think of this account in Genesis as just the story of how God made things and we move on. We've missed it. Moses is speaking to a people who God has redeemed out of Exodus, out of Egypt, that is, in the Exodus. He's bringing them to a land, he's establishing a covenant with them, and part of their history that they need to know about humanity is that man was made for this kind of thing, to be with God. Well, that's what I have then in terms of review for this first chapter. I hope the emphasis and the thrust is helpful again. Next time, we'll pick up in chapter 2 and look at the conditions in the garden, and we'll move on again to 3 and 4, and we'll dive into chapter 5. It'll be a few weeks. Any questions or comments on any of this?